So, the Endgame finally happened. 11 years of storytelling and 4 years of hyping the Infinity Saga came to a conclusion on 24th April this year. I know, we are late to the party, but we still have some thoughts about it. And by we, I mean the nerds here at Nerdy Entertainment.
You don't have any other plans. Do you want to join us?
So, what did we think? Well, the Avengers Endgame is the Dark Knight Rises of MCU dialed to an 11. Confused? Let us explain. And fair warning to those who've been living under a rock and haven't seen Avengers Endgame yet. Spoilers ahead. The Dark Knight trilogy is arguably the greatest superhero trilogy of all time. It had a solid beginning with Batman Begins, grounding the character, his skill sets, and gadgets in the real world. The series then delivered a benchmark of cinematic storytelling with The Dark Knight, thanks to Heath Ledger giving one of the greatest villain performances of all time. The movie also left the series in a bit of a pickle at the end from a storytelling perspective. Batman was left physically, emotionally, and mentally bruised and branded a public enemy. So, how do you bring a character back from that? Well, you skip forward a few years and show the hero at a low point in life, give him a compelling reason to don the suit again in the form of a formidable foe, have him fail spectacularly at first, and then have him make a triumphant return. The Dark Knight Rises does all of that. Before its release, it was being predicted that the movie will end with Batman sacrificing himself. But that wouldn't have been a satisfying conclusion to his story. So, how does The Dark Knight Rises end? Well, Batman saves the city from a nuclear bomb, fakes his own death, gets the girl, the reputation of his alter ego is restored, and he leaves a worthy guardian in his place to protect Gotham. Was The Dark Knight Rises the perfect movie? Far from it. Did the story require a lot of plot conveniences to progress? I mean, it did have terrorists who wanted to blow up Gotham but decided to hold it hostage to torture the soul of Bruce Wayne. And the mystery of a secret citizen holding the trigger? Did it have moments of logical disbelief that left the audience baffled at times? Like how did Bruce Wayne return to Gotham after escaping the pit when he had absolutely nothing? Sure. But was it the perfect send-off for one of the most iconic characters and offered great fan service? Hell yeah! Avengers Endgame is not so different in that regard, with a good amount of Back to the Future thrown in the mix. This movie is fan service on steroids. No, scratch that. On super soldier serum. Taking inspiration from Lord of the Rings Return of the King, it dedicates a good 25 minutes of its runtime to conclude the story arcs of the original Avengers. That is Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, Thor? Well, not so much, because he will return in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, or the Asgardians of the Galaxy. And the Hulk, or is it Professor Hulk now? And he gets his hand burned because of the Infinity Stones? Yeah, what's up with that? And the Black Widow, who dies in the middle of the movie. Not exactly the trope of women in refrigerators, but unceremonious nonetheless. The main problem with Endgame is that it works well as the second half of a two-part movie, but not so much on its own. To give a satisfying conclusion to the stories of the original Avengers, Endgame throws out many interesting ideas of the previous movies. It changes character traits and the rules of its own universe for the sake of convenience. Thanos is arguably the most compelling comic book villain since Heath Ledger's Joker. The missing context of his insane motivation from Infinity War reduces him to a one-dimensional villain that MCU was guilty of prior to the Black Panther and the Infinity War. He also manages to live up to his name of the Mad Titan with his claim of destroying the whole universe. Sounds familiar? His army at the end becomes yet another example of mindless CGI battle fodder for our heroes against an orange sky. Now I know that looks familiar. Captain America's Hail Hydra moment may be cool for the fans of the comic books, but for Chris Evans' Steve Rogers, it was a completely out of character moment. If this Boy Scout was capable of faking it, Civil War wouldn't have happened and Tony and he wouldn't have had a falling out. The movie tries to make Natasha's death seem like a big sacrifice, but it doesn't feel earned because Natasha carrying so much guilt over the lost ones didn't fit her character. Where was this guilt in Civil War after the incidents in Sokovia and Lagos? Also, the female Avenger moment at the end feels a bit unearned. Unlike Eowyn's I am no man moment just before she kills the Witch King of Angmar in The Return of the King. And now, on to the gaping logic holes. It was established in the Guardians of the Galaxy that no mortal can hold the Infinity Stone. Yet, Hawkeye is able to hold the Soul Stone. Tony and Steve are forced to go to 1970s to get the Tesseract when Loki disappears with it in the 2012 timeline. Couldn't they have asked Rocket and Thor to just pick it up from the Asgard's vault? I mean, it was just sitting there. I guess poking Natalie Portman with a fork-like device and the Big Lebowski talking to his mother one last time was more important. How were Professor Hulk and Tony Stark able to fashion a gauntlet powerful enough to house the Infinity Stones? Just like Bruce Wayne was able to fix the autopilot on the Batwing before having his back broken, I guess? And how was Thanos able to travel to the future with his enormous army without enough Pym particles or the technology that the Avengers had? The same way Bruce Wayne made it back to Gotham without having anything on his person just a night before the nuke's detonation? See what I did there? When War Machine and Nebula get the Space Stone from Quill, shouldn't they have been attacked by Korath, who was tailing Quill in the first place? We realize that the majority of the discussion here may have been against the movie, but make no mistake, Avengers Endgame is a feat of filmmaking, and it is a wholly satisfying final chapter. There are a gazillion character moments and interactions that leave the audience wanting more. The end to Tony's and Steve's stories could not have been more perfect. It's just that the creative team behind the movie decided to do away with any plot or arc which couldn't be resolved in a straightforward way. I mean, the movie is the culmination of 22 stories of God knows how many characters told over 11 years. But once you start thinking about it and discussing it out loud or online, all of these lingering questions start to surface, and you realize that the Endgame is a good film, just not a great one. So for us, Avengers Infinity War takes the cake and remains the high point of the series. So, do you agree with us? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.